John, I just got so much to get into with you. Actually, even though you've been covering the NFL for a long time, I want to ask you about baseball. Are you as excited as I think most of my audience is, even if they're not baseball fans, for baseball to just be back on Thursday and for the sort of rhythms of the American summer to feel like normal again? And do you feel that down in Houston with the Astros among people who are sports fans in your community?
I sure am. I'm fired up about baseball. I've been a baseball fan since I can remember, watching Willie Mays in 1960. And the Astros, of course, dodged a huge bullet because of the coronavirus, because now there's no fans to boo them in other cities. And unless they're going to pipe in boos on the speaker system, they're not going to hear any, at least in regular season. And playing 60 games is great for them because they got an old pitching staff with Justin Verlander and Zach Greinke, so not having all that wear and tear should make them a legitimate contender to return to the World Series after winning a franchise record 107 games and losing 4 games at home in the World Series.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the reaction. Fans are not going to be in the crowd, at least early on. But, man, it is – I feel like the Astros cheating scandal feels like it was like decades ago as opposed to a few months ago. And I think you're right. Most American sports fans are just so excited for sports to be back that whatever the Astros did or didn't do, I think most people are over it.
I think, Clay, if they were to win the World Series, they won in 17. Yep. They lost last year in 7 games. But if they were to win it next year, there would be all the venom would come back if they were the defending champions. So it might be best for them just to not even make the playoffs.
Yeah.
Let somebody else go to the World Series for a change.
It's interesting way of looking at it. All right, let's move over to the NFL. When you look at, first of all, you're in the Houston area, and I know everybody's had different experiences all over the country. Does it feel like things are getting better in Houston right now, getting worse, staying the same? How would you assess it from your perspective?
You talking about from the Texans in the NFL or from the coronavirus?
The coronavirus to start with.
No. We set records every day for people who test positive or people who die because we still have a lot of morons that won't wear masks. But that's just the way it's been, and that's the way it'll be. And until they start handing out fines like parking tickets, there'll still be a lot of people just refuse to do it.
All right. So, but do you feel like it's getting better in Houston than it was, or does it feel the same from your perspective?
It feels the same, Clay, because my wife and I do everything we're supposed to do. We don't let it hamper our lives too much, and so we do everything we can do. I've known people who've had it, who've gotten over it. I've known a couple people who've died from it, but all you can do is what you're supposed to do based on what the health experts say, and then hope you don't get it. You can't let it just ruin your life.
Amen. All right, so let's go back to football now, which is what I was excited to bring you on to talk about. What do you think is going to end up happening based on the people that you talk to surrounding the NFL? I started off the show saying, John, most people are opposed to the preseason in general, and so I think the idea for fans of there needing to be preseason football is not something people are committed to. Is that a big part of the tension that exists right now, whether there's any preseason football?
Well, first of all, the Texans and Chiefs rookies and assorted veterans report today. Yeah. They get to report before everybody else because they play that first game on September 10th. Their veterans come in on Saturday, and they're supposed to practice Sunday. But as it is, you come in, you undergo testing. Every NFL team has a mobile unit at their facility to test them and get the results within 24 hours. NFL's paying a fortune for a private company. That way it doesn't affect the public. So players and all the personnel, including me, under the policy, 10 media people go to practice and in the building, although we can't be around the players. So we'll get tested, too, when the time comes when the veterans are in there. So it feels with the Texans and Chiefs reporting like it's starting, but there's so many issues. J.J. Watt, Deshaun Watson, Drew Brees, Stephon Diggs, Russell Wilson all tweeted yesterday with a hashtag we want to play about they want the league to get off its high horse and come up with some protocols the players can live with. Because right now, Clay, they're going to have to go to work. And even though the league has given them all these options and recommendations, the union hasn't accepted them because a lot of them are unfair, like an August 1st deadline to opt out for the season. Number one, they may even have these protocols in place by August 1st. And I think if you opt out for the season, that's ridiculous because what if they get a vaccine by then? So I think if you opt out, you should be able to come back at some point in the season. They don't know preseason games, roster sizes, opt-out clauses, salary cap implication, your base salary, what happens when you test positive, what happens when a group tests positive. They don't have the answer to any of these questions. They don't want any preseason games. The coaches, of course, always want preseason games because they need to evaluate a roster. As it is now, I think they'll play one, which doesn't seem fair. Every team ought to have a home preseason game so they can just go through the process of no fans. And the other thing is, they need to know how many players are going to test positive. You can't wait till regular season and then all of a sudden find out the first game, like, say, the Chiefs and the Texans, that 20 of their guys test positive the next week. It might be one, might be none, might be 20. They don't know. That's why they need at least one preseason game to let them bleed on each other, sweat, spit, snot, everything they do during a game, and see what the ramifications are. But the only way you're going to find out, Clay, is you got to do it.
We're talking to John McClain, Houston Chronicle, longtime cover of the NFL. You ever seen anything like this in your life?
Absolutely not. The only thing people ask me about strange things in my career, I covered a 9-game season in 1982 because of a player strike. And the weirdest thing I have ever been associated with, Clay, 1987 player strike. They call in replacement players, scabs, had 3-a-day practices. The first game, the Texans played at Denver. The unions acted like they were going to come from all over the country to Mile High Stadium. They were going to cause all kind of problems when the Broncos and the Texans players who had crossed the picket line played. So on the bus were guys with machine guns and shotgun guards. We went the special route, every time we went under an overpass, there were machine gun guards on those overpasses as our buses went under, and they were also outside the stadium. So it felt like I was in a police state, and then nothing happened. But I've never seen anything like that, and I hope I never do again.
What do you think ultimately ends up happening? Do you think we will play, so you mentioned Texans-Chiefs is theoretically the opening Thursday night football game. Do you think we will play, I think that's September 5th on that opening Thursday night, if I'm not mistaken. Do you think that game will take place and the NFL will kick off as expected? And I'm looking at the calendar now, and it may actually be, is it September 10th, sorry, not the 5th. Do you think that'll happen? The first game of the NFL season will go underway September 10th?
I do, because Roger Goodell and a lot of owners, a lot of powerful owners, want the season to go on time. So a lot of people in the government want the season to go on time. The NFL is a sense of normalcy out there. So I think what will happen, they'll play that first weekend, see how many people test positive. What we don't know, Clay, is if you do have one team that tests, say 5 guys test positive and they're 5 starters, that's too bad. You know, what if the first game Watson or Mahomes test positive? Gamblers are going to be unhappy. The bookmakers are going to be unhappy. The TV people will be unhappy. But you don't know until you go out there and do it. I think we'd be naive to think there's not going to be interruptions to the season. They have protocols that they can move, contingency plans, move the Super Bowl back to the last Sunday of February. And they could even move it to March if they wanted to, because they're the NFL. They play in their own stadiums. And so I think that they definitely will start on time. Whether they continue to play those games depends on how many people test positive, and I don't think there'll be any fans anytime soon, although teams have been working on for weeks plans with like 15,000, half a stadium. They have to be ready for anything because, you know, there could be a cure at some point during the season.
We're talking to John McClain. Everybody knows how big football is in the state of Texas. And I know we're talking about the NFL, but I want to take a step back and go even a couple of degrees earlier than the NFL. What's the vibe on Texas high school football that you're picking up on? as obviously usually these kids would all be out aggressively getting ready in the hot summer sun of July as you get ready for August. What are you hearing about high school football in Texas? How much, if at all, do you think you'll see of that?
Well, you know, Clay, how big it is. There's a lot of towns, small towns. There's a lot of places around Texas because Texas is so big, especially out in West Texas. Either they're not getting tested or they haven't had any positive tests, and they want to play football. You know, they want to play with crowds. I don't think they're going to be able to in the big cities like Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, Fort Worth. They're very cautious about it. They're planning to play, but everybody's planning to do it. But they could all stop at the last minute. They're looking for leadership from the University Interscholastic League, and so far it hasn't provided it. And if there's no high school football in Texas, the lifeblood of football in our state, there's going to be hundreds of thousands of people who are going to be devastated.
What about college? What do you pick up on? I know there's a lot of Aggies. You're a Baylor Bear. University of Texas is huge too. Texas Tech, Big 12, SEC, a lot of smaller conferences as well, like the Houston aspect of this. What sort of vibe are you picking up on colleges in the state of Texas as it pertains to them playing?
The Big 12, of course, has said they'll wait until August 1st before deciding. I think we'll see every conference not playing the non-conference games. What would be better in the state of Texas, instead of playing West Virginia, you know, they can drive and play Baylor's in Central Texas. They can play A&M, Texas.
Yep.
Houston, SMU, they were all with the whole Southwest Conference is in driving distance, and they never have to leave the state. I don't think that'll happen, but I've seen where you wrote about some of these non-conference games. You can drive to them. What's the big deal? Why would they cancel them?
Yeah, it's frustrating to me when you got big games like, and the ones I used as an example were I used Iowa State, Georgia Tech, Florida State, Louisville, Kentucky. And Clemson and South Carolina, all five of those that I just rattled off there, and you just rattled off a bunch of rivalries in the state. I don't understand how you can cancel non-conference games that might require you, as you said, to travel all the way to West Virginia if you're a Texas school, or might require, let's say, Boston College to travel all the way down to Florida State, but you won't let guys get on buses and drive back and forth and be able to play against each other. That just seems to not make very much sense.
I think, Clay, the NCAA, of all the bodies that we've seen for sports, has the worst leadership I've seen. There's talk that the NCAA needs a commissioner. Let's think Emmerich has not done a good job giving guidance. Yep. And to me, whatever it is, it's got to be uniform. If they're all going to play non-conference, that's fine, but don't give one conference an advantage over anybody else. And that thing about the Blue Jays can't play baseball in Toronto because they don't want Americans coming across the border, I don't blame them a bit.
We're talking to John McClain. All right, let's go into the NFL itself. Let's pretend that this is going to be played and that the season is starting, and let's presume that most of the guys are going to be healthy. What do you think are the biggest and best storylines? You've been covering the NFL for a long time. If the coronavirus wasn't going on, I'm just going to lay a few things out for you. It seems to me like the storylines for the NFL are as good as they've ever been. I'm just going to toss some out. Brady in Tampa Bay, Cam in New England, Mahomes as the highest paid player in the history of the NFL, Deshaun Watson and the drama surrounding everything going on with Bill O'Brien, Aaron Rodgers with a new first-round quarterback sitting behind him that isn't going to make things great for Matt LaFleur up there.
And a new girlfriend.
And a new girlfriend, evidently. You got Ryan Tannehill getting big money with the Titans. If you go out west, you got the question of, hey, is Jared Goff overpaid? Are the Rams going to be able to overcome not having Todd Gurley? Teddy Bridgewater in Carolina. Everything going on with Russell Wilson and the Seahawks in terms of them trying to get back to building a high-quality team around him again. The 49ers coming off of another devastating loss in the Super Bowl for Kyle Shanahan. You got year two of Kyler Murray with the Arizona Cardinals. I'm sure I missed some incredible storyline, certainly the ongoing drama with Dak and the Cowboys. I'm sure I missed some. But I don't know that I've ever I could go through all 32 NFL teams, it feels like, John, and say, hey, there's a storyline that's pretty compelling for all of them. I don't know that that's usually the case or that we've had very many years that you could do it. Do you feel the same as I do, even having covered this league for 40-plus years?
Absolutely. The biggest stories, Brady and Gronk in Tampa. Can they turn around the Buccaneers? Can Cam Newton stay healthy and help the Patriots be a legitimate Super Bowl contender? I don't think they are, but that's something that is a great storyline. And the big one to me is, can the Chiefs, with 20 or 22 starters back, entire coaching staff back, with the best player in the league, with Clyde Edwards-Helaire coming in the draft, can they become the first team since the Patriots after the 01 and 02 season to win back-to-back Super Bowls? There's a reason teams don't do it. A lot of times they don't have the proper motivation. They get hurt. They spend too much time celebrating in the off-season, but it's almost like Mahomes is so great, he's not going to let it happen. On the other hand, everybody will be gunning for them. Lamar Jackson is an MVP, but he's 0-2 in the Super Bowl. The Titans discovered a way to really slow him down, make him throw to the outside, not down the middle, with an off-season to prepare for Jackson's passing game. Will defensive coordinators do a better job last year when he was the MVP? And San Francisco, the only team that loses a Super Bowl and then wins it's New England. You just don't, in the NFL, lose a Super Bowl and bounce back. And you'd think the Super Bowl loser would be the most motivated team in the league, and maybe with Kyle Shanahan and his new contract, they will be. But right now, because of that, I would not pick them to win the Super Bowl. And if I made a bet with one of my hosts in Houston, he gave me the Chiefs of the field, and I took the field just because of the odds. But I can't think of a season in my 45 years of covering the NFL that had more intriguing storylines beginning with Tom Brady.
Let me go. I didn't even mention Lamar, and that is a heck of a storyline. He's 0-2 in the playoffs so far, but coming off of an MVP season. You've covered the Texans for a long time. Before that, you covered what was the Oilers, now the Titans. Who should be the favorite in the AFC South? Phillip Rivers, another storyline there, new with Indianapolis. Jacoby Brissett goes to become the backup. Like I said, Ryan Tannehill gets big money. Derrick Henry gets big money for the Titans, who made a surprise run to the AFC Championship game. You've got the Texans, who had I think it was a 24-0, you'll tell me, 24-0 lead, I think, in the divisional round against the Chiefs before they fell apart there. And then you got the Jags, who it seems like are a little bit in the Trevor Lawrence sweepstakes potentially. Who should be favored? Who do you think wins the AFC South?
The Texans have won it 4 of the last 5 years, so they should be favored just because they've dominated the division. But because the Titans won those 2 road games in the playoffs at New England and Baltimore, I would take the Titans. The Titans finished 9-7 every year. They wouldn't have made the playoffs last year if the Texans hadn't rested 13 starters in the last game to finish 9-7. And then they did great. They haven't won the division in more than a decade, but I think that Mike Vrabel is a hell of a coach, and as long as he's got Henry making Ryan Tannehill a better quarterback because of the play-action game, I'm going with the Titans and the Texans, and then the Colts. I watched the Texans beat Phillip Rivers in L.A. last year, and I hope Phillip bounces back. He's a great guy. It'd be a great story there. This time last year, everybody picked the Colts, but Andrew Luck's retirement made them have a losing record. So I would pick them third. Of course, Jacksonville's a contender for the top pick. That probably, I think the best choices for that would be Washington and Carolina.
John McClain, you are an incredible asset to sports media everywhere. 45 years covering the NFL. I always appreciate it when you give us the time. Thanks, my man. Stay healthy. And by the way, one last question for you. How will you cover the games? Have you figured that out? Have they talked to the NFL media enough where, let's say on that September 10th, are you allowed to travel? Will the press box be open? Have there been any determinations there?
Well, I expect to be there because even though nothing will be but Zoom interviews, that first game with protest, with taking a knee, with an empty Arrowhead Stadium, you got to be there, even though I'll be watching most of it on the TV above me because the press box is so high up. But I think I'm not going to be able to interview a player or coach in person all season. And you know what? I think it's so intriguing and interesting, Clay, the world we currently live in. Someday we're going to look back on it and tell people, man, I know you don't think about it now because you got a vaccine, but let me tell you, when the coronavirus sent everybody into a panic, and it had an effect on football. Let me tell you about the games I covered, but I can't wait. It's going to be exciting. I'm fired up for baseball, basketball, hockey, everything, and every year I feel like it's my first year all over again, Clay, and I'm one pumped old SOB right now.
I know I said I was the last question, but as you were talking, it occurred to me, you're also one of the most knowledgeable people about movies and television, and I have gotten into Yellowstone, and I'm telling people, if you like kind of old school Westerns or updated Westerns, Kevin Costner is in it, and I know you've been watching this too. What other shows, give me your take on Yellowstone, but what other shows for people out there should they be aware of if you want to give them a tip?
I'm a big fan of Kevin Costner, so I've watched it from the get-go. I think Montana should be giving them everything free.
It's beautiful.
You and I talked
amazing.
about this.
Yeah.
We want to go to Montana because of Yellowstone. I'm thinking all the business that's going to help there.
I've never
resorts,
been, and I want to go.
You
and I were talking off air before the interview. I want to go so bad because it looks just so incredibly beautiful.
The guy that created that show, Taylor Sheridan, is from a little town of 400 outside my hometown of Waco, Texas, and he did one of the most underrated movies I've ever seen, Hell or High Water, with Chris Pine and Jeff Bridges. So he created this show. He likes Westerns. He likes the outdoors, and I've watched all of it. And another one I've really gotten into since the first episode, the new Perry Mason on HBO.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Very good.
Awesome. John McClain, keep it up, my man. We want to get you on again soon. Stay healthy, and I can't wait. I'm excited as you are, as you said, an old SOB for a lot of sports coming back. Appreciate it, my man.
Thank you very much, Clay. Enjoyed it as always.